Yeah, we should ask questions.
The informational items, we can't go on the action items. We wouldn't repeat the presentation before.
Correct.
We just can't take action on any items. We have discussion and we cannot take action.
So you won't be able to take anything to your board for your, one of the items requested.
Well, we will. We just
Well-
won't have TAC recommendation.
Got it.
Audio should be.
Okay, let's start over. just
Okay.
So everybody hears it.
So starting this technical advisory committee meeting for SCTCA today, and we don't have a quorum today, so we're asking for a vote of the voting members here today. If we will have a meeting today and take action, but nothing, we aren't voting on anything that will have action today. And per Edith Cotta's question, we won't have representations of what's presented today. So,
We would take a vote to continue as committee of the whole.
so we're taking a vote to continue as a committee of the whole. Everybody in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, we'll continue. Thank you. So item 1A now is introductions, going around the room, starting on my left.
Not a city voter park.
McLaughlin, Sonoma County Public Structure.
Brendan Barrett, Town of Windsor.
You're good, Greg, City of Lima.
Training Wilson City of Santa Rosa.
And Hennessy, City of Santa Rosa.
Dave Ripper to SCTCA.
Shauna Gauze, SCTCA.
Elizabeth Tyree, Sonoma County Regional Parks, going to the back of the room.
That's right. Yeah. In the Fred and CCA.
Adam Garcia, SCTCA.
Thank you. And Dawn, would you help us by introducing the people that are online?
Jerry Will, Rob Sprinkle, J.D. Lee, Alejandro Perez, Warren Roki, Charles Smith, and Pablo Rosa, James Cameron, somebody named Joanne.
Joanne. It's Joanne Parker and Smart.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for being here. So moving on to item 2, public comment. Is there anybody making public comment today? Anybody online? All righty. So item 3, approval. Can we approve meeting minute
No.
notes? Does anybody have any comment on the meeting notes? I have one, actually, just a minor note. Is on page 5 of the packet. It should be Larry Zimmer, not Terry Zimmer. On item number 4. All right, so moving to item 4. Adam, do you have a presentation for us?
Actually. Good afternoon, everyone. Adam Garcia, data analyst for Sonoma County Transportation Climate Authorities.
Yeah.
Here to present on the comprehensive transportation plan, performance update, and our travel model forecast. One second. All right, so today we're going to just be talking just briefly about some of the efforts to update our travel model from to the 2050 forecast timeline that's consistent with MTC's planned area 2050 plus. We'll also then be looking at, based off a number of different scenarios, how the travel model evaluates these different futures, largely based off two different variables. One are the transportation projects that are in the CTP. So all of those projects listed there, how will those affect overall travel behavior within the county, but then also incorporating planned Bay Area's jobs and housing projections as well. So those come down kind of as from the regional level. And then we use different steps, which I'll go over, to try to allocate where those jobs and housing be located. So going forward, the four scenarios that we're looking at within the travel model are, for one, is just what was the world like in 2023 based off roadways, buses, the land use. The second scenario is a no growth scenario with the CTP projects implemented. This comes from recent trends where we're having some population decline. I think most recently we have a slight uptick according to the census, but based off that growth pattern over the past few years, the California Department of Finance projects that same rate into the future. So thinking maybe we don't have the great construction boom that we want, that job growth slows, but we still implement those CTP projects. What would that scenario look like? The third scenario is the planned Bay Area housing and jobs growth with the CTP projects, and then the fourth is that 2050 plus without the projects. So to give you a sense of the growth getting allocated for households, it's about 25,000 new households across the county, and then for jobs, that's about 53,000 new jobs by 20. To give you a little bit of a sense also just where we have projections and from different estimates. Our population, as I mentioned, is up a little bit in 2023 based off ACS 5-year at 485,000. Just a little bit different than the Department of Finance, but that projection into 2050 was what I was referencing, where they say by 2050 there would actually be about a % decline. So that's the no growth scenario. In terms of housing, most of the values are pretty similar. For the planned Bay Area 2050 plus, that's actually occupied housing, so that actually tracks pretty well with the census as well. And then for jobs, also finding that approximately 211 up to 225,000 jobs across the county, and then showing that growth of about 24% by 20. So to assign the land use development, we essentially looked at our inventory of all the planned development projects, which we scraped from the different lists off your jurisdictional websites and from the most recent 2023 update. But also then just looked at the past 2040 growth patterns, focusing in on PDAs and where zoning is appropriate. The one notable difference that we wanted to know for the population projections for students was a decline for the elementary, high school, and college age populations, and then their associated enrollment. So as a refresher, these are the different land uses that we track across residential, office, commercial, institutional, and industrial. Looking at the spread, then this is the allocation of that planned area growth. So can point out the negative numbers for the educational, that's high school and elementary school and college age. But overall showing growth across all other sectors. So in terms of what we kind of found from this is kind of fundamental to planning around the jobs housing balance. That if new construction can continue in terms of for housing, that could match hopefully that projected job growth. If new housing doesn't continue, but job growth continues, you'll get that inevitable jobs and housing imbalance where you would effectively increase VMT and travel flows coming into the county from workers coming from outside the county. So here's just a few charts showing the housing growth where it's 2023 plus showing 2050, and then the rate of change between the two. I'm sorry, the total change between the 2 years. So primarily multifamily development is expected a lot. Less development in greenfields, though there still will be some sites available around our cities. Quite a bit of growth in office and commercial still. And primarily warehousing is one of the more robust job growth sectors in the county right now from recent economic reports. So consistent with these projections. So looking across the multifamily housing growth, primarily in a lot of the downtown areas, although there are some PDAs and other developable sites where multifamily housing was projected to grow. And so moving on to the CTP update, essentially what we do is we take those different scenarios and then evaluate their performance through our vision and our goals, as well as different performance metrics. So overall, our vision is around connecting people and places in our transportation network to zero emissions by 2050. So they on our essentially looking at our performance measures, we can see the different ways we can evaluate the performance of our transportation system for system condition and safety, travel efficiency, transit use and active transportation, and then equity and environment. So we'll be going through this list. But first, just overall, this is a high level analysis. So we're really just doing a light touch evaluation for this CTP. The next CTP will likely be getting into more depth into evaluating those different goals and metrics. We want to be able to expect growth from a lot of the construction that's going around, but just with global changes, as we know, and futures very uncertain. A lot of the projects, as you know, that are in the CTP are financially unconstrained. So this is kind of our wish list. Of course, we have funding to do a lot of these projects, but undoubtedly there will probably be just a handful that we don't get to by 2050. But hopefully we can get to all. A lot of our transportation systems and our development patterns are fairly built out. As I mentioned, there's a handful of greenfields. Still within our city limits and urban growth boundaries where development is possible, but a lot of the other development will have to be a little trickier to when we develop projects. And as we know, just where we build our jobs and housing and the transportation systems that connect us all are the kind of primary factors that will influence our travel decisions. So while we hope that a lot of the measures in the CTP projects will have a big difference, there's a fundamental land use pattern in Sonoma County that will take a lot more to be able to really influence some major change. But nevertheless, we can evaluate with what we have, the tools that we have, right now to be able to understand those changes. So looking at system condition, ground pavement condition index. What we know is there's been a slight increase over the last few years countywide in the PCI, but a lot of future investments are necessary to continue that increased PCI. There are a handful of modeling tools that are out there that jurisdictions can take advantage of to be able to project that based off funding availability, but in our case, these are limited projections. For transit connectivity, what we see is essentially about a 200-hour increase in the transit vehicle revenue hours for our bus service. So trying to increase the frequency along certain key routes. We can see the impact then from that in some of the subsequent charts. Looking at the collision rate, there's kind of two different lenses that we can evaluate this by. One is the projected collisions based off EMT, which we would project an increase, but another way would be actually looking at the transportation injury mapping system that's includes all the injuries included in our Vision Zero database in our dashboard. That actually shows a drop kind of from the pre-pandemic level around 6 accidents a day down to about 4 accidents a day. So potentially through that perspective, some progress there. In terms of hours of delay, we're looking at both the monthly person hours of delay is that increase is roughly tracking with the population increase between 2023 and 2050. So we're kind of maintaining the status quo with implementation of the CTP projects and that projected land use growth. Of course, without the CTP projects and that land use growth, we can see nearly 4 hours of delay per month. So just gives some credence to the effectiveness of some of those CTP projects and trying to move us around more efficiently. In terms of the average trip length and average travel time, because I think largely there's still only minor growth around the county, you really need larger infrastructure projects for transportation and for land use to really change these average trip lengths and travel times. So we see mostly consistent levels of trip times and trip length across the cities. For the share of means of transportation to work, I think the obvious elephant in the room that's not shown there is the work from home increase. So that's largely displacing kind of our means of getting to work through more sustainable means by public transit, biking, walking. And also then looking across the mode share for essentially all trips on the right chart, we see that there is some increase in transit use. That's a % mode share. So a little bit of improvement there through the increased frequency of bus service. For the bicycle facility network connectivity, this chart essentially shows us all of the ATP projects that most of them that have been approved with withholding Santa Rosa, Petaluma, and Windsor. So this number would probably increase once we get all of that data and those final numbers incorporated. So probably looking at more than a tripling of ideally of our bicycle network across the county by 2050. And that's for all modes of, I'm sorry, all classes of bicycle facilities. And then for transit ridership, as I mentioned, we see that good bump of about 7,000 to 8,000 new riders coming on board from the 2050 CTP compared to 2023. That's still, you know, a small overall percentage from 2.7 to 4%, but that's quite a few displaced vehicles on the road, so helping reduce some congestion as well. Like the average percent of household income spent on transportation is projected to increase slightly, largely based off nothing that necessarily in the CTP, but more from statewide and regional discussions going on around user-based pricing strategies, such as measuring by vehicle miles traveled or user fees. So going from potentially up to 18% to maybe 20%. For greenhouse gas emissions, we see a decline. Ideally, again, this is projected by increased vehicle fuel efficiency and economies as projected by the state of California. So even though there may be a slight increase in VMT, we're hoping that improvements and requirements for vehicle efficiency will continue and reduce overall emissions into the future. And then associated with that distance, we can see the vehicle miles traveled, the VMT per capita. One of the highlights, I think, is just thinking in terms of vehicle per capita between 2023 and 2050. If there's, you know, not necessarily a decline, it's holding the status quo with the increased growth in jobs and housing, still maintaining kind of the same VMT per capita. So trying to essentially hold that line if we can increase it or decrease that further. Here's just a few quick breakdowns of the VMT by jurisdiction. It's shown by VMT per capita and separated out by VMT per employee. This is going to be about, this is just counting 1/2 of the trip according to state requirements of how VMT is measured. Within the travel behavior survey, you'll see that number roughly doubled. That's why it's counting kind of both sides of the trip, both the origin and the destination. So that's why you'll see, you know, just some discrepancy between our travel behavior survey and the travel model evaluation. Cloverdale and Sonoma been noted to be just a little bit outliers as compared to the travel behavior survey numbers. Cloverdale showing a slightly higher VMT than what is expected in the travel model survey. And Sonoma actually seems a little bit high for the travel model being the highest of the jurisdictions. So we're hoping to refine this VMT and other travel model data into the future when we transition from our travel model. It's currently a trip-based model to one that's more refined as an activity-based model, which can hopefully dial in some of these land uses and trip patterns to a finer detail, especially particularly in the active transportation modes. Looking at the countywide assessment, we see, I think, maybe some obvious findings that the further away you are from those urban centers, that the higher VMT will result. So higher VMT for a lot of those. For that, for So the main findings, essentially is we're excited to see the CTP showing increases in the transit service revenue hour through this increased frequency. Increasing ridership by up to 65%. The congestion also it would be expected just to increase slightly, but essentially be maintained with population increases. And thirdly, the near tripling or more than tripling of our bicycle and pedestrian connectivity. I think the recent ATP work across the county really shows bears its fruits in this regard. And lastly, just our hope that greenhouse gases will continue to decline with increases in the vehicle fuel improvements. So over the course of the next few months, we're hoping to reach out to each of the jurisdictions primarily to review the 2050 results, but also begin discussion of updating the general plan scenario, the general plan build out scenario. So this is a different perspective of that build out scenario, whereas the 2050 plus is really a requirement for our kind of partnership with MTC and being a regional as part of the ABAG and MTC. For the general plan build out scenario, that's often used more practically in CEQA analysis for projects and plan level evaluation. So this is an important update to get on track and make sure that if you have updated your general plan since 2020, and as all of the jurisdictions have updated their housing elements, we'll have to take an evaluation to be able to understand where those growth patterns are expected based off the general plan scenario. So that will be coming up this fall, winter, and then into next year, we'll be working on model validation just to examine the general plan build out scenario at 2050 results and scenario, as well as updating travel behavior study, which, as you likely know, uses big data to be able to use cell phone data to evaluate travel patterns. One of our hopes is to be able to particularly focus in on tourist behavior as well, to where people are coming from that are visiting and staying as tourists. So, with that, I'll stop there and open it up to questions.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the depth and breadth of the report and the presentation. I want to open up if there's questions from the group on the report.
Thanks for the work and excellent, very detailed explanation. Do you have a sense why why we're not seeing more motorship track votes? Pretty significant holdout of whatever.
Yeah, that's a flag as well for us. I think that's largely based off the trip-based demand model. It doesn't have really that detailed on class facilities. So all of those additional facilities that are going to start to ideally network and creep across the cities isn't modeled in there. So we can't effectively connect those trips if it doesn't really as detailed. What our hope is that activity-based model will have that capability to have that level of detail. It's more like doing
Low stress.
yeah, kind of a SimCity version of where you can provide facility types. So I'm not sure to what level we'll be looking at, but it'll definitely be beyond just class.
That's my question too. I saw the data and I felt bad.
Yeah.
I was like, I feel like we're working kind of hard and seeing things like percentage of household income spent on transportation staying exactly the same. Or, I mean, transit ridership increasing was great, but then feeling like, oh, we're putting in all this low stress infrastructure and is it not to make a difference? That's the whole.
Yeah. Also the proliferation of electric mobility, longer trip distances become feasible and for a wider segment of the population. Kind of lower see reality. That's that.
Adam, can I add something really quick?
Yeah.
I don't want you to get too frustrated. Like, one of the big things is there's so many trips per day, right? That are already happening in vehicles. You know, even if you're getting like huge increases in walking and biking, it's like we were showing like a 0.5%. That's a lot of people walking and biking, right? So you're just up against a lot of people driving already. So it seems like it's not a lot, but there's a lot of opportunity there for sure. Yeah.
They got worse than in Rosa, be hard to hold switch.
I have a question or two kind of in the same vein. I noticed the growth of the households and the jobs. One at 13%, the other at 24%. And I was curious to your perception of how the jobs, how to balance it now. Noting that those percentage growths are quite a bit different in the future.
Yeah, I haven't run the numbers specifically on what the jobs housing ratio is for each of the counties. That could be an interesting project to just understand a little bit more, and nothing came up really on doing internet searches, but I know it's calculable. What I can tell you from just riding the SMART train 3 days a week is that there's a lot more people going to Marin than folks coming up to Sonoma. So in terms of, and kind of anecdotally, what I've heard is that there is a more balanced jobs housing growth when you think about kind of Sonoma and Marin along the SMART corridor, and even within Sonoma itself, I think as well too. But again, that's mostly anecdotal, and I think it's worthwhile maybe to run some numbers to get a better sense of that.
But are those inputs from Plan Bay Area that you've just taken and imported to the model and run it with the anticipated transportation network that will be through the CTP?
Precisely.
So, I mean, that to me sounds like a worthwhile additional metric to include in here is not just VMT, but average trip length, and noting the ability of, the proximity of jobs and housing, and kind of getting to Bjorn and Trina's questions about why we're not seeing more mode shift if we're building out in the same patterns that we are right now. Then you're locking in all the trips that Chris mentioned that, are stuck doing what they're doing now because they can't feasibly make a different choice. And I hope that we're not continuing that, the status quo with respect to that build out. I also wanted to ask quickly about the travel time and delay metrics. So delay is up, travel time's the same, trip length is the same. That tells me that the free flow time is down, which means that the speed has to be higher. And you're also showing in your metrics that crashes are higher, which would seem to go hand in hand. Is that an input to the model that is included, or how do we get speed up? Is that just a result of capacity projects in the 2050 CTP that are allowing higher speeds?
Yeah, I don't think there's, and if anything, we've worked on incorporating some of the speed reductions that have gone in according to the 2023 existing conditions, some in Santa Rosa, I know that we updated. So I'm not sure if, Chris, do you have a thought about how that might come into play?
So I don't think you'd see increased speeds overall. I think probably what's happening is based on those 25,000 additional jobs and like 25,000 additional housing units, and probably 50 or 60,000 additional people, and then like 50 or 60,000 additional jobs. Those are mostly happening closer in. So I think that's keeping those trip lengths roughly consistent, but there are just more people moving around. So that increases that delay. if that makes sense, without moving the speeds up. So that's definitely something we can check in the model, is seeing the average speeds and looking at different corridors and segments. But I would guess the speeds are going down. You're just moving more people around with shorter distances because they're going to the closer in areas. But there are more people, so I think one win is the congestion's not going up a lot, even with the additional growth. So, if the CTP wasn't doing anything at all, you'd see congestion go way up, those trip lengths go way up, the travel times go way up. But we could definitely dig into that a little bit more and investigate speeds a little bit more, for sure.
Is there any members online, Dawn, that have their hand raised for questions? Thank you for checking. And as a reminder, we're meeting today as a committee of the whole. We don't have a quorum today. We will not be taking action on any item. But I want to open this up to the public if there are any questions from the public on this item.
Yes, please. I'll come up there so you can hear me better.
Is the microphone available?
Oh, you never want to hand a microphone to me. Just sit up there.
Okay.
You just be right next to you. There you go. Isn't there an extra chair right there? You don't have to leave. They want to hear from you instead of me.
Here, Dwayne, I got you.
Come on over. Thank you.
This one's on.
Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt. I'm from Roseland, and I'm both a bicyclist and a driver. And I spend a lot of time paying attention to what kind of things you folks are talking about. I apologize, I arrived late. I have an idea of a lot of what's occurring because I pay attention to MTC. And I used to spend a lot of time at ABAG meetings, MTC, all that type of stuff. I just want to tell you from a real world experience, congestion is increasing here, at least along the Highway 101 corridor, and at least along the Highway 12 corridor, and all those general areas around Santa Rosa. Thousands of housing units are being built, and I don't know how many jobs are coming in, but just from a real world perspective, people are becoming more concerned about what was once called the housing jobs imbalance. And this whole thing that's been going on for 25 years to have workforce housing come in and to do all these different things. So I appreciate that you folks are being cautious when you are. It's all right to make sure and actually get the things you want to occur, have them come forward. The SMART train basically gives free rides to people my age. The bus gives free rides here in Santa Rosa. A lot of that's being used because people don't even have to pay, and yet it's still underutilized. And the most you see of bicyclists in Santa Rosa, at least, is on Taco Tuesday, when they're getting together to go to one spot, hang out, talk, do their thing. So the ride share, the mode share, all the different things are not really getting better. They're basically staying the same. And I'm hoping that you folks will look deeper into it. I can't stay for the whole kit and caboodle today, but safe routes to school, that's one thing that'll get more people, I hope, riding bicycles, especially on Burbank Avenue where Roseland Creek Elementary School exists and where there's a difficulty to get the city of Santa Rosa to enforce the speed limit of 25 miles per hour and to put in safe travel lanes. So these types of things that you talk about are very important. I'm glad for the city of Santa Rosa staff that finished the active transportation plan. It would not have come about as quickly as it did if it were not for these two employees, one of whom has earned the nickname, if you will, in Roseland, Dan Delivers. So thank you so much for all the stuff you do. And I can't stay. I'm taking an agenda with me. And please don't hold it against Mr. Hennessy that I spoke highly of him. Thank you kindly.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt.
Kindly, time.
Don, are there any other questions from folks online?
No, there is not.
All right, thank you. And with that, we'll move on to item 5, countywide safe routes to school plan update.
Well, that's a high bar you set, Dan. I'm in the mode of trying to deliver, but it starts with putting some plans together first, so. Okay. Microphone. Thank you, Shauna. Can everybody hear me? All right, wonderful. Happy Thursday, in advance, happy holiday weekend greetings. I'm gonna use this time to provide you an update on the countywide Safe Routes to School plan. We've been quite busy over the past couple of months, so I have a couple of updates about what we've accomplished and the work plan that we have established to move forward in doing infrastructure improvement planning, starting kind of now. So let me begin with quick overview. As a reminder, we received a Safe Streets and Roads for All fiscal year 23 grant, supplemental planning grant that is funding this countywide project. I'll also note that I believe I've shared this update with most, that we have also received, or we're moving forward with the FHWA agreement for the Safe Streets and Roads for All for fiscal year 24, which is a demonstration grant. And the reason I call that out is that there may be some interesting opportunities to take the planning exercise that we're doing now around some of the Safe Routes to School streets and then subsequently applying the quick build treatments. So potentially some good synergy there. I'll walk through our prioritization. We have 204 schools in the county. We have finite resources, so we are needing to use a data-driven approach to decide which schools to focus on for this grant period. We'll solicit some input on the education and encouragement activities and a quick update on speed reduction limits study in City of Healdsburg. Just as a reminder, the green boxes represent what is the focus of Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition's work, education and encouragement. They also do the data collection on travel tally modes. So travel tallies, in other words, collecting the data on how children travel to and from school. And they also do a great job of collecting student addresses, which helps us physically locate them relative to their school campuses, which is great data as we start thinking about the routes that we'd like to prefer or prioritize for improvements. The blue boxes represent the area that we are now expanding into under the countywide Safe Routes to School Plan project. So a couple quick reminders about some of the expanded goals as part of this grant funded scope, which is again to be more proactive in responding or proactive in looking at where we want to focus our infrastructure planning efforts as opposed to perhaps being reactive. Again, through a collaborative approach, which we had great success with the fiscal year 24 application. So similarly, as we start creating infrastructure plans that we hope to be more competitive and secure those funds. I think there are also opportunities where we'd like to bring more people to the table or at least just broaden the awareness by new stakeholders, particularly at the more senior level, whether it's school district superintendents or board members or elected officials in various geographies, just to increasingly let people know the good work of Safe Routes to School and how we can get them involved in the planning process. And also perhaps enhance how we are hooking the goals and objectives of Safe Routes to School to existing school district or city plans. Probably sounds pretty obvious, but again, with new partners, be them superintendents or others, there are probably opportunities to share how our work through safety education and active transportation skills and improving the safety of the roadways around schools may actually dovetail nicely with some of their own district goals. The schedule, which some of you may be familiar with, City of Healdsburg, we are in fact in the process of wrapping. We have engaged all the schools in the city. We are now brainstorming and concepting on a set of corridors and school zones and anticipate being done with the Healdsburg work by the end of this calendar year. And we'll be reaching out to the other 9 jurisdictions, probably later this fall to start thinking about the schedule and when we will be engaging. We have actually started the conversation with Petaluma and Santa Rosa already, with the goal of having all of this work completed by spring of 2027. So where are we going to focus our attention? This thing is quick. Our universal schools, again, probably not surprising, but a visual representation of where both our public and private schools are. We had a fairly aggressive screening process. We made sure that we touch base with all the superintendents of all 44 districts for them to ensure which schools are in fact in operation so that we have a decent school universe. Number ended up being 204. And here is the distribution. Obviously, these materials are available to you, but just a quick cut at where those schools are located. Oops. Apologies. And distribution, 20% private school, 80% public schools, calling out that a good 25% of those are charter schools, both private and charter. Not surprisingly, it's good to remember the genre of school that you're working with. Charters tend to have students that are not confined to enrollment boundaries, so all the more reason to make sure that regardless of the school type, that we're collecting that student travel mode data. And how did we develop the prioritization? So I'm pleased to be joined by Angelica Rocha of Farron Pierce virtually, so welcome. And she will walk you through the indicators and the rationale that inform the algorithm that rank the schools. Over to you.
Thanks, Margot. Hi, everyone. Angelica Rocha from Farron Pierce. As Margot mentioned, our top priority for this effort was to understand and score schools based on need. Another goal that the consultant team was charged with was developing a strategy that SCTCA could reuse and reevaluate in the future as design plans are completed and improvements are implemented at these schools. So with that, our team developed a methodology that's regionally calibrated and includes 6 indicators that represent transportation, climate, and social equity needs. So each of the schools in the county were analyzed and received a score based on all of these 6 indicators. And so the table here presents how we kind of separated or thought about the indicators differently. We categorize them by road-based indicators and place-based indicators. So what do we mean by that? Road-based indicators are indicators that are joined or exist along the roadway network. That includes the number of pedestrians and bicycle crashes that occur near schools, or the number of roadway miles that are on the region's high injury network or high injury intersections and how close they are to schools. Our place-based indicators, which we have 4 of, included a variety of spatial geographies and places, and these indicators are based at the school level and also varying census geographies. This included the number of youth residents living near a school. We also included the student health and climate adaptive need, which are based on statewide index scores. These consider education attainment, employment rates, environmental quality, low income, and disadvantaged areas. And then lastly, we considered an equity impact that considers the percent of students at each school that are eligible or enrolled in free or reduced lunch. Next slide. So this snapshot here shows what happens on the technical side. But the takeaway I'm hoping that you all understand is that our indicators come in a variety of shapes and sizes. So you see points with those red dots on the left-hand side, you see red lines in the middle map, and then polygons on the right-hand side. And so for all the indicators except free and reduced lunch, we assigned directly free and reduced lunch, which was assigned at the school level. We use this buffer. So the blue circle that you see on the screen is a half-mile buffer for all of the calculation. And we use this distance because it's commonly referred to as a comfortable distance students can walk to school. You may have also heard of using a quarter-mile buffer for younger school-age children, but given the rural nature of Sonoma County and also the lack of enrollment boundaries and being able to use that in the analysis, we went with a half-mile buffer. And we used Guerneville here as an example to understand how these geographies then look compared to the buffer distance around each of the schools. So this example here is around Guerneville Elementary, and we have, again, points, lines, and polygons and showing how they're calculated. So I'll walk through the points approach here, which is the bikes and pedestrian collisions within that half-mile buffer of the school. So essentially, we count all of the collisions that occur and develop a score based on that. For the lines example, the map in the middle of your screen, this is an example of the high injury network, where we counted the length in high injury network within a half-mile buffer. And then we normalized that against all the schools analyzed in the county. On the right-hand side, we have the polygons. And so this is showing census block groups. That's the colors you're seeing in light purple and blue and yellow. And we're estimating the number of residents under 18 based on the share of their census block group. And then we calculate based on the buffer zone. So just wanted to provide a snapshot of how this approach and different geographies get scored for each of these criteria at the school level. And with that, I'll pass it back to Margot.
Thank you. All right, so with that in mind, we ranked ordered the schools 1 through 204, and there's a distribution of those schools as sort of shared before. We know what the universe is, but here's the distribution of private and public across of the top 100 schools. So in that sort of the top 50% of the top 100 schools is consumed by Santa Rosa and the unincorporated areas, and then the subsequent percentages below. The reason I call this out, and here's a more detailed, it's a bit of an eyesore, but you have the presentation, is this is 1 through 50 and 51 through 100, simply representing that because such a large percentage of the top 100 were unincorporated or Santa Rosa, that our goal through the countywide Safe Routes to School plan is to provide infrastructure improvement planning for all of the jurisdictions. So we needed to move from a very sort of linear 1 through 204 into a more customized infrastructure planning work plan for each jurisdiction. So the way that we did that is for each jurisdiction, we looked at your highest ranked school. So for example, I'll start with Petaluma. Of the 1 through 204, Petaluma's first highest ranked school was number 23. It's followed by the subsequent number of schools. And as we looked at those top ranked schools within each jurisdiction, we also looked at opportunities to bundle them, meaning were those schools of high priority in a geographical proximity that we could think about doing a bundle? Do they share some common major arterials or roads or connectors that may feed an elementary to a middle to a high school, or again, a bundling of elementary schools, again, because they're different school districts and with different schools, et cetera. So this is the example of Santa Rosa. They have their top ranked school is the Luther Burbank. And then the subsequent set of schools were what we considered in enough geographical proximity that we have bundled them and sort of calling them the Roseland Southwest Santa Rosa bundle. We are, however, as I mentioned, with Santa Rosa and Petaluma in conversations about ensuring that this is the appropriate bundle. There are adjacent projects, there are projects that overlay with this, there are grant applications that overlay with this, so want to ensure that we are not duplicating and or if we have the opportunity to assist and build off the work or applications that are in the queue. So I have shared this information with, or it is available to obviously all the jurisdictions here and those online. Don't hesitate to reach out in reviewing them. If you have questions or seek clarifications, by all means, happy to do that. As I shared in our schedule, oops, I think, did I have a schedule? No, I don't have a schedule yet. Happy to have those conversations over the next couple of weeks as we are starting to chart out the timing of collaborating with Mark Thomas. With most jurisdictions, it's a little bit different in between Petaluma and Santa Rosa. The process would be working with your jurisdictions, hosting the site assessments, meeting with the school administration, district administration, and your school communities, having those engineers on site, doing the surveying, and then developing the concepts and finalizing the projects. Also wanted to share that in the city of Healdsburg, in parallel, there is a speed limit reduction study that was completed in the spring. Their city council adopted these speed limit reductions, and we focused during that study time on streets within school zones. And so reducing speed limits, not surprisingly, is yet another treatment in the toolbox to consider. I have extended an invite to you all to attend a speed limit reduction workshop on the 23rd of October. Not only will we tap case studies from Healdsburg, but also Santa Rosa will be sharing the good work that they are doing, both in the press and otherwise, knowing that those speed limits have gone in. So look forward to your attendance in that. Real quickly, I'll transition to programs. Again, the bulk of the education and transportation encouragement is hosted by SCBC. We are looking at revisiting some of the programs now because a large portion of the contractor's money is OBAG, and OBAG 4 is needing a scope from us in early 2026. So we're soliciting yours and others' input on how the programs have been going, if there are other programs that you're interested in seeing, so that we can consider it as we finalize our scope as part of the OBAG process. Many of you may be familiar what SCBC is doing now, a whole series of in-school activities, both on the education and the skills building side. And I also mentioned what I'll call the infrastructure support services like the tallies and the mapping. All good work that we fully anticipate wanting to continue through the OBAG 4 funding. However, there may be some opportunities to refine or enhance some of that work. So welcome any thoughts, concerns, or clarifications that you might have. One is that currently our contractor SCBC does most of their work at the local school level. And as I started at the top of this discussion, a real interest in trying to expand the types of stakeholders and perhaps influencers or decision makers that we could broaden their awareness and hopefully their participation in Safe Routes to School. Similarly, would like to continue incorporating site assessments. So through the contractor, continuing to get those feet on the ground and bolstering the type of site assessments that we're doing. There may be some new strategies that we can use, such as intercept activities at the school front to get more school community feedback. It has been challenging to get very robust parent and school member or school community member participation in site assessments, but that input is incredibly valuable. So I'm bolstering the approach on the site assessments. Also, the annual walk and roll to school day, SCBC has done a great job. There are some tools that we may want to consider so that we're really seeing a full countywide participation in that type of day. Obviously, it's a high visibility kind of media impact day, but it's a great launch pad to promote Safe Routes to School and open the door with administrations about ongoing Safe Routes to School work. And then lastly, in the spirit of truly shifting mode, much to a bit of the conversation started by Adam, looking at piloting at 2 schools, a very dedicated, funded chaperone approach to doing walk and roll buses to school. Again, SCBC has really done a great job in developing resources and materials to help schools should parents want to volunteer and make these happen. It is fully shouldered on the most part on volunteers who we know stay for a bit and then life gets in the way. So there are some increasingly successful models in funding staff to be able to facilitate these so they really become a regular part of school children's life. And we would like to try to bolster that and pilot that over the OBEG period. So those are more sort of refinements as opposed to really out of the box, completely new type programs. So if you have any thoughts, questions, or things for us to consider, by all means. Again, just a clarification on a little bit deeper on the pilot school approach and the schedule for the OBAG. The reason that we're having the conversation now is so that we can finalize that scope for our Safe Routes to School programs by January of 2026. And with that, questions, comments, concerns? Leave it at that.
Thank you, Margot, for the presentation. And is SCBC online with us today, and would they have any comments specifically because they've been working with you on this?
Sure, thank you. As part of the grant supporting the countywide Safe Routes to School plan, there is a task to refine encouragement and education. And as part of that, they are a sub on that. So we are ensuring that we are absorbing all of their expertise and learnings and inputs as we are crafting this.
And Madam Vice Chair, if I may, we do not have a representative from SCBC online today.
Okay, thank you.
And they have actually, they will be presenting to our board in September. They do an annual overview of their activities of the previous school year. So we have been partnering such that they do their annual review, and then I'm also providing this presentation. So good collaboration there.
Terrific, thank you. So opening it up to the group, any questions, comments, feedback from TAC members today?
Everyone, was consideration for whether recent audits had been done near the schools included in the prioritization?
Not in the prioritization, but as we shift into starting to think about working with that subset of schools, ensuring that we are referencing all of the walk audit information that has been collected. And I know in Santa Rosa, we've been having conversations, some real back and forth with Alexander to make sure we're very aware of what audits have happened, what has percolated to the top, but also ensuring that there's an overlay of some of the applications for SS4A, et cetera, that we are aware of that and what the scope of those are so that the Safe Routes to School oriented infrastructure planning is helping to complement or augment and not be duplicative. So I have veered. I haven't really answered your question because it didn't affect the prioritization.
Well,
But happy
I
to-
think to that point, the prioritization methodology is great because it highlighted schools that we have mostly already done. And I would just hate to see that work be duplicated and not be advancing towards actually getting infrastructure improvements on the ground.
Correct. And I think in the spirit of Petaluma and Santa Rosa, that's why we're starting the conversations now is how much further can we push even the concept development so it is as grant ready as possible. So should funding open up or slide in with some work that you're needing to do, but point taken.
Anybody else here? Any members online, Dawn, with their hands raised? Thank you. And I'll ask if there's any public comment, and I'm guessing there's no hands on that either.
No.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you very much for the report and the update. And I'm sorry we won't be making any approvals or recommendations at this meeting. All right, moving on to item 6, measures M, and go Sonoma.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. This is an informational item. It's included in your agenda every month. It has information on the obligations and the appropriations that have happened thus far, or if the project has funding that has been programmed and not appropriated, that also shows up just so that you are aware that you have money available to you. We do have policies about reprogramming that money if it doesn't get used. But not for Measure M, but that could happen for Go Sonoma. Just, I don't see anybody not using their Go Sonoma funding yet, but it does tend to happen with Measure M. That I'd answer any questions if there are any.
All right, thank you, Shauna. And item 7, regional information update.
This item is also included in your agenda every month. This is the inactive obligation plan, or the inactive federal obligations. The Caltrans updates it every couple weeks, and this is the most recent. I apologize, I was not here for the development of this list, so it does not carry forward the notes from the previous meetings that we've had. But other than that, the information is accurate. So please take care of them if you have outstanding inactive obligations.
All right, thank you, Shauna. Any questions here in the room, online? Public comment? I'm guessing no. All right, item 8. This, I think, what a lot of us have been waiting for, because a lot of us spent a lot of time working on this. Thank you for all your work up front, creating these applications, and for your help with the technical support opportunities. Much appreciated. I know we use them. And I'm guessing all of us look forward to hearing this item.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. As you know, this is an update on the SCTCA funding program cycle 2 and our initial program recommendations for a couple of different funding sources. So the call for projects was released back in June. All the cities and transit operators submitted their top priority projects. All projects must be in our comprehensive transportation plan update that Chris's team is working on, that we heard about from Adam earlier, to be eligible for funding. And then funding awards are going to be announced in kind of a rolling fashion between this fall through spring of 2027. We did do some technical assistance that none of you benefited from. This was paid for using Go Sonoma funds that we had policy adopted by the board to set aside 5% of the MTIS and BBP, move traffic, improve safety, and build bicycles and pathways funds for technical assistance for applications like this. This included assistance on mapping, preliminary designs, cost estimates, technical assistance on stuff like greenhouse gas calculations, and also public engagement. We were doing this to try to ensure that everyone had the tools they needed to help prepare quality applications, given that we knew there was a very complicated and lengthy application that needed a lot of technical input on that. And then we also want to be sure that we also have good quality applications that be able to be submitted for other federal and state discretionary grants, such as the Active Transportation Program or Senate Bill 1 programs. Overall, we had 60 applications that received technical assistance from our consultants, and I believe all but 3 of them were submitted for funding. Most jurisdictions took advantage of this, but a couple did not. A couple of transit operators. But we definitely are soliciting feedback on the performance of the different consultant teams. I know some of them seem like they provided better products than others. Communications with some of them were challenging. So we just want to hear if there was any feedback that you would like to pass along on how the process went, not only for technical assistance, but also on the application itself, so that we can better inform how things go on the next cycle in 4 years. And happy to pause and see if there's any thoughts now in the room.
I'll just note, I appreciate the focus on thinking about the grants for other programs. It made this timeline very challenging. And I think we would have liked the opportunity to have that discussion ahead of this, and having learned through this process what that looks like. I would hope it would look different next time, given the repetitive nature of some sections of the applications and the burden that it put on our staff, and having to explain to our city manager why some work wasn't getting done to fill these applications out was not a fun conversation for me. So that might just be us, but you ask for feedback.
Yeah, and we are here to receive it and we appreciate the feedback. And we definitely are wanting to try to make this not only cover all the requirements that we have for our different funding sources to get the information we need, but also not put a burden on your staffs to make sure that we get the information we need, but also not put you through too much of an effort for projects that may or may not get funding.
And this, we're really welcoming the feedback right now because this was, of course, the first time that we've been through this process in this way. So we really need your feedback in order to refine it to what we think will be more ideal in the future, but we can't, I mean, this was, we're happy to take the input, but we had to start somewhere.
I had some concrete input about the consultant help. With the way that it was designed, I wish that we hadn't had the consultant help. It did muddy the process a lot for Santa Rosa. A couple of things that could have been helpful and could be in the next cycle would be having the consultants on board before the call for projects goes out. So the call for projects came out June 10th, but then we didn't have the consultant help until early July. So we didn't move forward with the applications yet because we didn't know what we'd get help with. And so that took several weeks off of our ability to then address the applications. I think the thing that would have been really helpful was if there was consistency in what each of them were helping with. So we had 3 consultant groups for maybe half of our applications, and one consultant group would help with X, and another consultant would help with X and Y, and then another consultant group would help with Z and A. And so then the management of who's helping me with what, and then what gaps am I filling in for each application was really complicated. And then it turned out that the systems that I built with some of my colleagues was way more efficient than the consultants. So then after they had been doing work for a couple of weeks, I would get a product and be like, oh, we had it nailed down. We actually didn't need your help. And then the last helpful, like concrete thing I can give for the consultants was them having a very clear deadline from SCTCA of when they had to get us materials. We had one consultant get us materials 2 days before the due date for the wrong project. And I didn't know the whole time that they were working on it, that it was the wrong project. So then I had to go in and redo everything at the last 2 days. So a deadline would be helpful that was just communicated in the beginning. But some of the help that we did get was truly helpful, and I was able to go back into some of my other applications and improve some of the stuff that I did. So I don't think it was like not at all helpful. It's just, I think there were some things that could be improved next time.
And I think I see Larry has his hand raised.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Elizabeth, for chairing today. I have nothing really new to say other than just wanting to add in what has already been said, in that it was quite a burden on staff, the amount of time spent taken away from other things. It really can't be understated. It was a pretty big deal for us. It worked out and we got it done, luckily, because we had a brand new employee who started and did nothing but grant application for 2-3 months. The consultant help that we had was quite good and helpful, and we would have probably struggled without them. So thank you. But again, the timeline could have been better had we been working on all of this earlier, had the consultants on board earlier. The whole thing just felt like a scramble, and it didn't necessarily feel like our best work, which is always something that we don't have to do. But that's it. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for the feedback, and we definitely go ahead.
To wrap it up, just some feedback from the county and regional parks. Yes, the consultant feedback was helpful. We did have confusion in messaging who they were providing information to, specifically the transit related, because they provided the information to the wrong agency. But appreciate that it did get to you for the application. And like what I've heard from others, having a longer window for something for these types of applications and gathering all this information, I understand that you needed to fit it into the timeline of when other funding opportunities were available, so you were limited by that. But typically, I see these periods being more like 6 months rather than the shorter window. So for the future opportunity, looking at a longer window, and yes, you yourselves did a scramble to put the guidelines together, but having those further ahead of time would be helpful. But again, thank you for the process.
Would we have the opportunity to give you written feedback for really specific things? I mean,
Yeah,
because
we would definitely appreciate follow-up emails or phone calls if you have specific issues with specific consultants or specific parts of applications. We definitely welcome any feedback.
and I do echo everyone's I mean, I do similar experiences. The deadline, I was surprised. I didn't realize that I had to tell our consultant the deadline that, I mean, I received we had two tasks. One of them was fine. The other task was I didn't receive the product until after the deadline. So it's, which was, in the end, I did what I had to do. But that was a little surprising. And more of my comments will be specific to the questions and how it lined up with the rubric, or the question didn't even sound like the rubric. And the repetitive nature of it. So it's good we had the rubric, because if I answered what was in the application, it would not have lined up with what was on the rubric at all. Even the for example, I don't remember which question it was, but the rubric said we had to define, mode shift. What mode shift would this improve? Okay, it would increase bike mode shift, but the rubric was about need. Nothing in the question was about needs. So, I realized that it should have caught that before we approved the rubric and the application. So that's on us. So next time, but I'll have specific detailed questions or feedback about that sort of thing.
I'm curious, if other cities took this to their city council, and if so, when in the process we took it? That was something we took it 2 or 3 weeks before the deadline. It's kind of a challenge because we didn't want to go too early, because then we wouldn't really have enough information prepared for our council about the funding program and the requirements and what projects would be more competitive. So we kind of aimed like somewhere in the middle, basically between call for projects release and application deadline. But then that also, I started hearing, some feedback for a city manager, like city council, there might be some changes, so that I didn't want to sink a bunch of time into the applications, and basically consolidated my application with about a couple weeks after we went to city council. So I'm curious if others had any experience with that.
We took ours, the call for projects was the 9th. So we took ours on the 10th. And we told our council that that though they can prioritize 5, we would only take 3. We would only do applications for 3, and I only finished 2.
We did a informal review shortly after the call for projects, and then a consent item late,
Okay.
just so we had their approval for anything that would be needed for other grant applications.
Well, like we said, we welcome any feedback that you have, you want to pass along, and go ahead and proceed with the rest of the presentation if that sounds good. All right, so we received a total of 72 applications from the jurisdictions and the transit operators. The total funds requested added up to almost 792 million. Big chunk of that was from requests from SMART for their extensions up to Cloverdale. And then included in your packet is a summary of the applications. We'll be updating that summary Excel spreadsheet as we work through the applications and have follow-up questions to you all on clarifications, corrections. And then eventually we will have a updated version of the spreadsheet that will have links to all the applications so you can review them online. So just going through the number of applications that were submitted, we got 3 from Cloverdale, 5 each from Cotati, Healdsburg, and Petaluma, 2 from City of Roanoke Park, 9 from Santa Rosa, 5 each from Sebastopol and Sonoma, 10 from the county, 5 from Windsor, 4 each from Petaluma Transit and Santa Rosa City Bus, and then 5 each from Sonoma County Transit and Smart. The totals requested really kind of were all over the place, depending on project needs and size of applications. And we will be continuing to evaluate these and providing updates as needed. To get into the items that we were needing action from the committee on today, but we can't take action. So for the 2026 State Transportation Improvement Program, we have to do some programming of those funds this fall. The funding amount that we originally had in the call for projects was around 16 million. However, due to decreased revenue projections by the state, due to shifts of vehicles to electric vehicles and kind of a more rosy projection that was done in 2024, we only have about 7 million or so in STIP funds available. Of that, we owe 3.4 million to MTC for a prior loan for the Sonoma Narrows, and then 209,000 is needed for our staff time to plan, program, and implement projects. So that leaves about 3.28 million available in the STIP for new projects in fiscal 29-30 and 30-31. We looked at all the projects that were submitted for potential funding from that funding source, and also the 2024 Senate Bill 1 Local Partnership Farm Lake Program. That way we could see if there was projects that needed to go earlier, projects that were ready to go, whether they're looking at leveraging a significant amount of funds, and also for STIP projects and generally most SB1 projects, if it has completed a project initiation document or the equivalent. And then we also looked at other factors. As I mentioned earlier, we needed committee approval this month so that we can go to the board in September to submit to MDC and CTC, and we'll be definitely taking committee feedback, but unfortunately we won't be able to take a vote today. This is showing an update of the anticipated funding we have for this call for projects. Originally, we were estimating about $100 million based on that higher amount of STIP funds. However, because of that decreased amount of STIP funds, we were looking at what other funding sources we have available to help fill that funding gap. We are looking at potentially adding TFCA, or Transportation Fund for Clean Air funds, to this call for projects, and looking at historical revenues and when we think those funds might be available. We're thinking maybe about 2.7 million would be available. We realize that normally we do a separate call for projects or TFCA funds annually. Usually that's around 500 to 600,000 annually. So it funds a lot of smaller projects, but that creates a lot of administrative burden on staff and local agencies to do a lot of reporting for very small projects. And so that's why we are thinking of perhaps adding these funds to the call for projects. Welcome any input that anyone has on that. This is a proposal that we're just thinking about right now, and we anticipate there wouldn't be any action on this formally till probably January, February at the board, when we would normally do a call for projects.
I have a comment. I would hope that you consider pulling TFCA from the call for projects, this funding program. And that's just because I know Roanoke Park would have liked to avail of the TFCA call for projects now that we haven't adopted active transportation plan. And we think that there are, because TFCA now will look at upgrading class, and it had for prior years upgrading class 2 to class 4, but now we actually have an approved document that says we can do such things. Yes, these will be smaller projects, but if TFCA is now pulled into the program, funding program, which it wasn't originally, then yeah, wouldn't be able to easily do such projects. So I know that we have no action that we can have as the committee to have you consider it, except for I just would ask that you consider pulling TFCA from the funding program.
That was the original funding program, and I do really appreciate the flexibility that the SCA provides us in and getting work done on a shorter term basis as opposed to the funding program.
Yeah, and one more challenge with this application was trying to write a grant proposal to respond to so many different funding sources and not knowing which one would be chosen. There are certain funding sources where if the project was matched to that source, I would tell you to keep the money. So adding this after is an additional challenge, and I appreciate what they've just said about especially the smaller nature of the TFCA grants and just being able to kind of fit that in where we have opportunities to.
Yeah, thank you for the feedback, and we'll continue to evaluate that. And as I mentioned, we're not planning to take any action on that. It's just a suggestion at this point. I should note there are two other funding sources that we are showing in the table. One is the Measure M Bicycle and Pedestrian Program and the Measure M Local Streets Projects Program. There were specific projects submitted by both the city of Santa Rosa and the county that would be eligible for those two funding sources. Given that we're trying to wind down the Measure M program, we'll be evaluating those projects to see if we have available funding capacity to use Measure M funds for those projects that are eligible for them. So we'll be continuing to look at that further. Leading us back to, and sorry, I'm going to pause and see if there's a question from Rachel as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on the TFCA issue. I also just want to make the comment, that could be a source that we might be interested in applying for again to support, our Fare Free program. I didn't put in a Fare Free program project into cycle 2 because I didn't see a funding source in cycle 2 that could support that. So I do think having that program be available for other project types, and as others have mentioned, needs that come along or smaller scale projects is really helpful. And so I just wanted to add my voice to, thinking that for us, it would be preferable to have TFCA remain a separate process. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you for the feedback. Leading us back to the recommendations that we had for the committee today, for the STIP funds that we have available, we are looking at, with the local partnership formulaic funds we have available, we're looking at the Windsor Downtown Bicycle and Pedestrian Crossing a 101 project. This project will widen the old Redwood Highway undercrossing a 101 in downtown Windsor using retaining walls to improve bicycle and pedestrian safety and mobility. This was a priority in the previous cycle 1, and the town of Windsor submitted it again. In cycle 1, we awarded $2 million in OBAG 3 funds and $600,000 of Sonoma MTS funds to partially fund the construction phase. The town recently completed the combined scoping and environmental phase a couple weeks ago, and they had applied to the California Transportation Commission for local partnership competitive funds to fully fund the project. However, they were unsuccessful. We are recommending an additional roughly $1,055,000 of LPP formulaic funds for the project. That would allow construction of one side of the undercrossing and potentially more if the town's able to secure other funds. This would help the town avoid the loss of the $2 million OBAG 3 funds if the project is not delivered by fiscal year 26-27. The town would still be able to pursue other funds to complete the rest of the project. And we feel that rescoping the previous LPP application the town prepared to use LPP formulaic funds instead would be relatively straightforward. Just to kind of give you an overview of the project, this is the existing undercrossing here near downtown Windsor. There is existing class 2 bikeways on both directions of the undercrossing, along with wide sidewalks. However, it's not necessarily a low stress facility for bicyclists going through several major intersections and ramp intersections as well. The proposed project would widen the undercrossing using retaining walls to have separate bicycle and pedestrian facilities at above the street level. This would include separate sidewalks and 10-foot class 1 bike paths on both sides of the undercrossing, and then also improve the intersections at Lakewood Drive and at the ramp intersections to improve turning radiuses so that there's less of a crossing distance for bicyclists and pedestrians. So overall, it's a bicycle and pedestrian safety project while not adding any additional vehicle capacity. The other project that we were recommending for funding today is the State Route 121 A Street East intersection improvement project. This project replaces a stop sign intersection with a roundabout or traffic signal to improve safety or mobility for all modes. It also was another priority in cycle 1 of the funding program and was resubmitted again by the county. Back in the 2024 STIP, we had programmed it with $3.1 million for the final design phase and $3.4 million for the right-of-way phase. And back in June, the CDC approved advancing final design phase to this current fiscal year. We've been working with Caltrans to identify funding for the construction of the project, but there are certain limitations on what they can use their SHOP or State Highway Operations and Protections Program funds for. And so there is a need to contribute some non-SHOP funds to the project to cover some of the improvements on H3Ds and other parts of the project that won't be eligible for the SHOP. We're proposing to program the 3.28 million of STIP funds we have available to the project. In addition, there's another 250,000 of funds that's needed to complete the environmental studies that we are working on right now. We're looking at using the available balance of Measure M bicycle and pedestrian funds. There is 1 million of unprogrammed Measure M bicycle and pedestrian funds that is available. This was from the fiscal year 2010-11 state local partnership program funding swap that was recently completed. A number of the small cities received funds through the local streets and roads program. And then there was also 1 million that was transferred to the bicycle and pedestrian program by that exchange. Those funds are available for any designated Measure M bicycle and pedestrian project. And we're recommending using 250,000 of that to cover the increased costs we have from the environmental phase of the project, as it includes a portion of the Sonoma Shelville Trail project, which is an original Measure M bicycle and pedestrian project. The remaining 750,000 will be available for any other Measure M bike and ped project, including the rest of the Sonoma Shelville Trail or other projects that were submitted. Just to give you an overview of the project, on the left, you can see a map of the overall Sonoma Shelville Trail. This is focused on kind of the very end of the trail at Highway 121, where the trail would transition to the south side of 121 and connect with the county's planned Bay Trail. The existing intersection is a side stop controlled intersection directly adjacent to the Smart Shelville Depot building and has a number of complicated issues with wetlands and the railroad and property owners around it. It has a lot of freight activity. There was a warehouse that was constructed on the northwest corner that is currently vacant, but at one time was planned for Amazon. And this would help improve mobility for this business along with other businesses along H3Ds. Here's the proposed roundabout alternative. There are two alternatives currently being studied. This would be a single lane roundabout that would widen the shoulders on Highway 121 and provide separate bicycle and pedestrian facilities around the center of the roundabout. And then also includes improvements on H3Ds to provide the Class 1 bike path that connect with the rest of the Sonoma Shelville Trail to the north. The traffic signal alternative has a much larger footprint, as there would need to be sufficient storage capacity at the intersection and then also at the railroad crossing. So because you have to have that additional lane storage capacity, you have to have sufficient transition space to drop it down into one lane. And this would require replacing the bridge over Arroyo Seco to the east. Because of that, the traffic signal alternative is roughly double the footprint and double the cost of the roundabout project. However, no decisions on the alternatives have been made, and we're still coordinating with SMART, property owners, and the tribes for input on the project. We're also coordinating with Caltrans on the bridge rail replacements they're working on at the Arroyo Seco Bridge and Yellow Creek Bridge south of the 116-121 intersection. Just to give you a schedule where we're at, here in bold, you can see we're presenting the recommendations to committees. This item was heard by the Citizens Advisory Committee on Monday, and they did approve it with the 2 abstentions. This would be going to the board on September 8th for their approval. We cannot delay the vote, unfortunately, due to the quorum today, because we need action by the board in September so that we have time to submit our nominations for the STIP to the MTC in October. MTC will take action on our nominations in December, and then following that, submit their recommendations for the entire region for the STIP to the California Transportation Commission. The CBC is due to take action on the STIP in March, and then following that, we will have the OBAG 4 call for projects. At that time, we will be working on evaluating the rest of the projects that were submitted our call for projects for funding, scoring them, and developing recommendations to bring back to you and the other committees next summer. We anticipate the board will take action on the remaining funding in September of next year, and then MTC would take action that winter on what projects that we nominate to them for OBAG 4 funds they decide to accept for OBAG 4 funds. We plan to wrap up this process in February of next year, and then following that, for the projects that are recommended for Go Sonoma funds, incorporating them in the next update to the Go Sonoma Street Implementation Plan. And with that, just want to close and say this is really kind of the biggest thing we do at SCTCA. It's a strong countywide investment of 90 million in funds that we've cobbled together over the next 4 years. And we're hoping to continue to have a transparent process with all the committees, the public, and the tribes on this. And if we had a quorum today, we'd be recommending your approval of these initial recommendations, but I'll pause and see if there are any questions or discussion. Thank you.
Are there questions from the group today? And was Windsor online earlier? Oh, I'm sorry.
Councilmember Leap is also online too.
Great.
Are both projects are noted as still needing additional funding? How far short are each of them for?
So the 128th Street East project, we are working with Caltrans right now to secure additional funds. It may be in the neighborhood of $11 million that they'll be able to program from the shop for the project, but we're still working on that commitment from them. If the Caltrans shop fund falls through, we are planning to apply for the Senate Bill 1 Trade Quarter Enhancement Program to fully fund that project. For Windsor's project, their shortfall is roughly 5.1 million right now. With this infusion of 1 million, they would be able to construct the improvements on one side of the undercrossing, but they would still need another 3 or 4 million to construct the other side.
Okay, so the money for Windsor does materially move that project forward. Does
Correct.
the money for the 121 8th Street project materially move that forward?
We feel it does. It would give us sufficient local funds to be able to leverage a large amount of state funds to deliver the project.
Other comments, questions, feedback? Any hands online, hands raised? Thank you. I guess is it what I'd like to hear from the group too, even though we aren't giving a formal recommendation.
Straw polls and kind
Yeah, some sort of general feedback. Is this something
Thumbs up,
you
thumbs
would
down.
be interested in moving forward some of these projects? The remainder of the projects will be working with you for updating the descriptions of projects and seeing how they best connect to the different funding programs. And so there'll be other opportunities for that. It's what I'm hearing, to refine our projects to match the funding available. You're seeking to move forward with some of the funding now. Of course, the county has a project in this group that we would support. But I'd like to hear from others what your straw vote might be.
My opinion is that it's hard to make a choice without knowing what the other choices available were. You know, from what David just said, this helps both projects move forward. So it's worthwhile in that it's not money that's going to do nothing in the short term. So maybe a question back to staff is, was there considerations for other projects that brought these two to the top that we should be aware of to know if?
We did look at other projects as well for the STIP funds, since they are programmed out in fiscal 29, 30, 31. There are a lot of other projects that could use that. However, STIP funds are very challenging for local agencies to be able to deliver. The administrative process going through those funds is very cumbersome with Caltrans. You need to have a project study report or equivalent to do those funds. And getting those funds programmed on a project that may or may not be delivered 4 years from now is something that we've seen historically. There's been challenges getting those projects delivered on time by local agencies. If we give the funds to Caltrans, they're able to deliver those funds very quickly. Their process is set up to be able to use STIP and other related funds and not have to deal with a lot of administrative burden with Caltrans local assistance going back and forth. For the LPP funds, those funds are available in fiscal year 25, 26, 26, 27. So there's a lot of near-term projects that could use them. However, we are trying to make sure that we do not have the 2 million of OBAG funds for Windsor's project lapse. I want to be sure that that project is able to move forward. We did look at another project in the city of Cotati that has funding needs on Highway 116 and West Cotati Avenue. That project, we're continuing to evaluate other funding sources that could be a good fit. And then we also are continuing to evaluate the rest of the projects as well. But we are really focused on which projects have funds that are potentially at risk of lapsing or will be able to leverage a significant amount of funds from Caltrans that is on the table. And that already either have a completed PID or are already programmed in this step in this case.
Other comments? Any hands raised online, Dawn? And so my other takeaway is the TFCA funds, making sure that's part of information shared, that there was other interests from agencies seeking to apply for that funding and to not include that for funding these projects.
Thank you all for the feedback. We will pass that along to the board, and apology that we don't have a quorum to take action on this item.
Agreed. It would be nice to have discussions from all the agencies too. But thank you for the work in bringing this to all of us today. Moving on to item 9, the SCTCA board meeting, September 8th.
Dawn, do you want to share it or should I share it?
Well, that's the technical, that's the TAC agenda. We're looking for the board meeting.
Here, I can pull it up real quick. So we have a number of items for the board in September. Just zoom in here. So we are taking action on a quarterly financial update. We're doing a resolution to formally try to document our name change to the Sonoma County Transportation and Climate Authorities, who've been having some issues with trying to get a website URL. So this is our attempt to move forward with that. Having a legislative update to the board, a proclamation of the week without driving. We have an action on the coordinated claim for transit funding, looking at an amendment to how we do that and how we do our formulas. We have a correction to the GO-SONOMA fiscal 24-25 budget. For those of you that have been asking about when you will get your first GO-SONOMA check, that would normally be received in Q4 of last fiscal year. We were originally planning to issue that this fall, but we got a recommendation from our auditors to instead do some adjustments in how we're using those funds in the last fiscal year. So you'll be receiving a check hopefully after this board action. We have an action on the GO-SONOMA Cooperative Funding Agreement and appropriation request for Petaluma Lynch Creek Trail Project and a resolution support for the Eel Russian River facility for regional water supply. We have, so that was the consent calendar. On action items, we have the item on the SCTCA funding program that we just discussed. We have an update from Margot on, an update from Christina Panza from Sonoma County Bike Coalition on the Safe Routes to School program. We have Margot's update on the Vision Zero Action Plan and also an amendment to our task order with Mark Thomas to deliver that work. And then we have Adam's presentation on the CTP performance assessment that we received earlier. We also have a presentation from BC CAPS of our staff on the Equitable Building Electrification Action Plan, and then our normal standing committee activities reports. And happy to answer any questions you may have on the board agenda.
Thank you. And now for roundtable discussion, item 10, grants being pursued, the bid environment, and other business comments, announcements. Open it up to the room. We all spent all our time on these last grants. That's what's my reply for other grants being pursued. How about the bid environment? Anybody bidding anything?
We've had, I think, 8 bid closings in the last 3 months. The first 7 of those 8 were all 20 to 40% over the engineer's estimate. But yesterday we closed one right at estimate with 4 of the 6 bids right on the number. And 6 bids is the most we've gotten on a project in a while. So optimistic that hopefully folks are engaged in bidding on the public sector work again.
Nice to hear. Anybody else? Anybody online? Any hands raised?
No.
Right. And any final other business announcements? Shauna?
I would just like to remind everyone that this is my last opportunity to remind everyone that September 15th is the deadline for submitting your Measure M annual reports, annual reporting letters. And we are looking for, Katati's not here, but we're looking for Go Sonoma reporting for Katati this year. But other than that, I'm sure everybody has seen all of those, but it's just my last opportunity to remind you.
Thank you.
Where they're
For that. Thank you for that reminder. Thank you for sending out the emails before. We appreciate your reminders, truly. So with that, close the meeting.